Our last and final panel for today are three wonderful people who I have the privilege to call friends. And we're going to be talking about looking forward. So thinking about what comes next for the Oregon Psilocybin Services Act. How is this going to look as we continue to iterate, taking all the things that we've learned from the many people today and so many other people in our community and turn it into action that continues to move this field and this community forward. So I'm very excited to invite to the stage Sam Chapman, who is the Executive Director of the Healing Advocacy Fund, Nate Howard, who is the Director of Operations at Intertrek, and Rebecca Martinez, who is the Founder and Executive Director at Alma Institute.
Can I get a quick hug in though?
Oh, please.
Yeah. Nicely done.
Nate just had a baby, y'all.
Yeah, shout out to all the moms out there. Wow. Good work.
Okay, so we are going to hear from Sam first, I believe.
All right.
Take it away, Sam.
It's taken so much to get to where we are today. I think I want to reflect back a little bit on my trajectory, which has been incredible, and then talk about a little bit about the future as well. You know, I got busted in high school by the cops on the last day of senior year. Went on a smoke drive with my friends. I came back, I was saying bye to teachers, and I got caught by law enforcement. Turns out they had followed me at lunch, and they wanted to make an example out of me, which they did. But I was given a choice in the principal's office. They called my mom from work. She came, and they said, look, like, you know, I was ASB vice president, so I was doing morning, afternoon announcements. I was a very public figure. And they said, look, like, you know, you have two options. One, get the hell out of here right now. You don't get to walk with your class. You don't get to say bye to anyone. Like, time for you to go. Or two, you get to walk with your class. You get to go to the final senior day thing, but you have to go to a 2-hour drug and alcohol counseling session because we think you have a problem. And I was one of 20 students in my 100-person senior year class. I'm looking at Becca because we've known each other since middle school. So she actually probably knows this story. And that was going to college. There was 20, 25 of us that were going to college. I was like, okay, get me the hell out of here. I'm ready to go now. But my mom, of course, wanted me to walk with my class. So for the first time, I went to a drug and alcohol counseling session, and I was totally honest. Yes, I used cannabis. Yes, I drank. Yes, I participated in other illegal activities. And I also got good grades, and I was good at what I did. And I was really, proud of a lot of the activist, type of things that I did in high school. And much to my surprise, at the end of that session, the counselor looked up at me and smiled and said, Sam, I'm really sorry you had to come here today. There's nothing wrong with you. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of the rest of my life. I found an organization in college at the University of Oregon, which is where I met Nate. We might have the biggest, longest known history on stage today. But I went to the University of Oregon and I discovered a group called Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Yeah, snaps for those who know what that is, for sure, yeah. And the entire philosophy was, look, we don't condemn and we don't condone drug use. We realize that people have the freedom to put what they want in their bodies. And if they're going to do that, they should be educated. So that was my first foray into drug policy. I did everything from, I was the guy that answered the door to cops at parties. And so I taught students how to deal with police encounters, to doing education. At the time, that was very taboo. And what happens when you mix MDMA and alcohol together? Whether the parents like that or not, that was happening every single weekend on college campuses. And it felt really important for us to educate students on that. And it was through that advocacy and that awakening that I actually discovered my white male privilege and how lucky I was to get a slap on the wrist where my friends of color lost their scholarships, got put in jail, and I did not see them for a long, long time. And it was at that moment when I really had that epiphany of my own white male privilege that I decided I wanted to use it in one way or another for good for those who were not treated the same as me for the rest of my life. And I feel very lucky and grateful to fast forward, out of college, I got directly involved in policy reform, drug policy reform specifically. At the age of 22, I co-authored my first law to legalize medical marijuana dispensaries here in Oregon. That was totally surreal. And did a whole lot of additional work throughout cannabis, and then finally got a little burnt out, as we all do, of one thing or another for doing it for so long, and made some space, and psychedelics showed up on the front door. And I got to meet Tom and Cherie, and was just so privileged and felt so lucky to be a part of the next chapter of not only flipping the bird to the war on drugs, which isn't a war on drugs, it's a war on people, right? Primarily people of color. And to be able to take a next step into this space, which is one that takes real responsibility in ushering in, a modality that has been around forever into American society in a licensed and regulated way, was the challenge and the opportunity that I was looking for next. And, I think reflecting back on that trajectory just makes me so proud of the work that we've all done. We talk about it all the time. I mean, we were just talking about it takes a village, and you know who you are in that village. And don't forget it, because it's not going to change. There's going to be ebbs and flows, and I think it's just so incredibly important, especially right now. Right now, amidst the amazingness that we have accomplished here in Oregon and now in Colorado, of ushering in a new path, a path that says just because you're a doctor doesn't necessarily mean that you know anything about psilocybin. I'm pretty sure they're still not teaching that in medical school. And conversely, just because you've been doing really good underground work for a really long time does not necessarily mean that you're ready to provide services to the masses, right? The Oregon program says, yes, we need everyone from that spectrum to participate so they can go back and serve the communities in which they come from. That is not an easy model. And in fact, I would argue it is the hardest model we could have picked to bring into reality, but it's the righteous model, and I think it's the right model. And I think it continues to be up to us to remind ourselves and to remind each other that when it gets hard, that we need to keep going and that we're here for each other. Thank you all for being there for us.
Thank you, Sam. Nate?
Thanks, Sam. When you said it takes a village, and you know who you are in that village, for the first time I had the thought, I'm a daddy in that village. Well, I'm still figuring out what that means. Not to make it all about me. Let's see. Maybe a little bit of inspiration about why I've been doing this work. And when I say work, I really mean trying to help wherever I can to help push forward a movement that has existed forever and has been cracked down, whether it was the Spanish Inquisition or whatever version of the war on drugs, or the latest war on drugs now in its 52nd year in the United States, push back to where we once were, where there's liberated access and people have the ability to heal in whatever way they want. That is really how I view the Oregon model and the underground and the FDA approach. And it started, I guess I would say this work started in part because I was an angry little kid. Not like terribly angry, but I think when I had a political awakening about 17, 18 years old, we're all from Oregon, so we all went to local schools. I was at Franklin, and I had this kind of realization But I was like, oh, we're relatively poor, and that means that there's systems that work against us a bit more, that there's these massive subsidies that create what is largely the fast food industry, and that is something that we can afford, and that leads to higher rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity, and kind of from there learning more about systemic racism, and I just got angrier and angrier, not even realizing it was happening, and I was rebelling against my parents, who are just delightful and really doing their best, having kids early and leaving the military early, and having my late older brother with his variety of ailments. And it was around the time that I met Sam, and I think the thing that bonds us to a degree is we all seem to love drugs. Won't go into that too deeply, but it's a common denominator. And,
Hi, Mom.
and I found organizing. Initially, it was environmental organizing, specifically environmental justice, where you look at environmental policies through a socioeconomic and race and ethnicity lens. And I did that for a couple years, and it kind of turned my anger into a bit more joyful, and a bit more, more jokes came a little bit easier. And fast forward, about a decade I spent in different political campaigns or elected offices, working in the Senate. I was like, sure, you can have a meeting with the senator's office. I was running, Senator Mark Hass, Sam, there's no way you're going to convince him. And Sam comes out of the meeting and convinces this relatively moderate senator to support the bill to regulate and legalize medical cannabis, which is what allowed us to eventually end prohibition in Oregon with Measure 91. Thanks for Sam. And ultimately, I found myself working in the mayor's office for someone who at the time was a very popular state treasurer. You wouldn't maybe know that now. His name's Ted Wheeler. And we thought we were the change Portland needed. And we did some good things, but I didn't realize how brutal some of these systems are that we create. And yes, there's different intentions that people have, but I just saw up and close, once again, another broken system that was distorting people, and I watched myself and my colleagues essentially begin to engage in minor self-destruction, and to the point where I totally self-destructed and didn't want to compromise on any of the policy work I was working on, and had a terrible falling out in the office, and was really, I'm not going to curse, but I was really effed up, and I had no idea until I was like, I'm going to eat some mushrooms and lay back on my couch. And luckily, my partner, who's now got a doctorate in psychiatric mental health, was there to be essentially my impromptu facilitator. But it just created this transition, and this doesn't happen for everyone, but for me, I was at a crossroads, and it really reoriented me. The next day, I found it easier to look people in the eyes, found it easier to have conversations with my parents. I finally said yes to couples therapy, which I thought, we would never do. I became open to getting a dog, whatever. And I heard through the grapevine about this therapist couple that ran groups for male offenders, court-mandated male offenders, not the most sympathetic group. And they were doing good work with that group, but they wanted to add another tool to the toolbox in the form of legal access to psychedelic medicine, ultimately landing on psilocybin. And Tom and Shree answered my texts, helped me, or allowed me to help them with what I thought was a total long shot, no chance in passing. And after the culmination of nearly a decade of work, and so many people in this room and on the stage making this happen, boom, here we go. Now there's a new game in town, which is state-regulated models, access to psychedelics. And I'm just kind of blown away that we're even here, and we have so much more work to do. I'll kind of leave it there. My main hats, I am honored to run the nonprofit, the Shree Eckert Foundation, which is to see Shree's vision through of equitable access. She also did a bunch of great stuff in that measure that made it a humanistic model, non-diagnostic, anybody can practice without a medical degree. And her vision is slowly coming together. In the foundation, but we have more work to do. Another hat, which is the one I'm supposed to represent today, is the Plant Medicine Healing Alliance, which is to create more legal protections and safety for people who want to practice into the undergrounds. I feel like if we say, let the medicine move through you and see what comes up, I feel like we should be similar in terms of the way that psychedelics are finding their way back into culture and into humanity. And so I don't throw shade at the FDA model or the Oregon model or the underground. I'd like to see them all flourish with more safety and not prohibit them, because when you prohibit things, it becomes less safe. All right, my 5 minutes or something else.
Rebecca, it's all you.
Hello, everyone. We will see how we do. I think I was a little too excited at the community table today. So my voice is a little different than usual, so bear with me. Wonderful to be back here. It's been a year and some months since our first Horizons here. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I am the founder and executive director of Alma Institute, which I'm happy to share more about while we're here today. A little bit about me. I use she, her pronouns. I have the privilege of living and working in this beautiful city, which is now known as Portland, Oregon. I come from a mixed ancestry. On my father's side, he's indigenous to northern Mexico. And on my mother's side, we come from Spanish, Portuguese, and Irish descent. Those come through in my work and my own learnings about my lineage and how to practice with mushrooms in a good way. In terms of professional roles, I have been around the map and back. I do know these fellas through some cannabis work back in the day and earlier, back in middle school and high school. I do remember when Sam got busted. It was tough times. Who would have known we'd be here now? And I've gotten to know Nate from cannabis farming. I worked in food justice for a long time and felt really passionate about communities having what they need to thrive. And I think that has been the through line in my work for the last decade. That has taken shape as community organizing, being in a lot of positions of sort of written communications and public education, advocacy, and various social enterprises. So for me, being a part of the Measure 109 ecosystem actually came out of a personal passion. I had not so different from Nate, I had a personally transformative experience with mushrooms in 2016 when I was at a major crossroads and had sort of torn down my life and my marriage and career. I had a small son who was 3 at the time and was really questioning some foundational tenets of the way I had been brought up and how I wanted to live my life. And I had the opportunity to have an impromptu facilitated mushroom session with a fellow mother who was an herbalist in a tree house in Milwaukee, Oregon. And I know we talk a lot lately about the need to not promote this as a panacea or life-changing. And I will hold that for me, that was a truly transformative day. It was truly life-changing, as were many experiences communing with the mushrooms and other medicines, both natural and synthesized, for the following 7 years. So I never feel comfortable taking up the mic without acknowledging the mushrooms themselves, who I've come to know as allies and friends and intelligent beings who I see smiles because I feel like we know that. And also those who also have known that for many, many generations and have tended to these medicines so that I and so many get to be beneficiaries of this beautiful work now. So that's a little bit about kind of where I came from and how I got to here. Alma Institute is tough to talk about because it is actively emergent. For those who have been here today, you've probably gotten to hear from my dear education director, Emma Knighton, who's a dear friend and collaborator, as well as Claudia Cuentas, who's Alma's cultural director. And just want to shout out our liberation director, Cyrus Anaya, who's at home in Detroit. And he has been a huge part of this work we've gotten to do this last couple of years together. When I worked on Measure 109, we were traveling the state and we were garnering support, trying to raise, 160,000 signatures on the brink of a pandemic. And somehow it happened. And I felt a deep, deep responsibility as it began to look imminent that the measure would pass. And I had a deep question around, is this the right move to be doing this kind of regulated access first? And aware of the gaps and the people it would leave behind, and aware of who was not in the room, and the deep, very complex, and sometimes not so complex reasons why they were not in the room. And so through a few different projects, I ended up founding Alma Institute 2 years ago on November 19th. So we just celebrated our second birthday, and it's been a very full 2 years. It was really, I guess in tandem with the two-year development period, we kind of had our own 2-year development period. And we built a training program from the ground up. It is not only approved by the Oregon Health Authority, but by the regulatory body in the state that approves private career schools. So we learned how to make a school and how to build a faculty, and we spent a year building a curriculum to work in tandem with the Measure 109 Psilocybin Services Act. I stood on the stage last year with the intention we were about to start enrolling folks, and I'm so overjoyed to share that a couple of weeks ago we graduated our pilot cohort of psilocybin facilitators. I'm making eye contact with some of them who are in the room right now, and it's more than that. In that. As far as we can tell, it's also the most diverse group of facilitators in this program yet. It's over half communities of color, it's over half queer and gender diverse people, many who were able to access partial or full scholarships to go through the program. And so in those gatherings recently, as we've been celebrating them crossing over from trainees into their journeys as new fledgling facilitators, it's just been deeply rewarding to see in them the threads of all these communities that they represent and they come from. And diversity, not just in terms of race and ethnicity and language, gender expression, but also diversity in terms of why they're wanting to be psilocybin facilitators, and the work and expertise that they came in with, and now the ways that they're innovating on what's possible within Measure 109 to serve the specific populations they're passionate about. So that's my great joy. If you meet Alma facilitators as you're around, give them lots of love. They've just done such beautiful work. In terms of what's next, we're dreaming into when and how the next cohort could take shape, and also what a physical learning center could be like in the Portland metro area, and how we can show up more deeply for psychedelic community here, not just those who have come through Alma, but those who really are rooted in this program in so many ways that we want to just support the flourishing, the celebration, the continued learning of those communities. So yeah, I think I'll pause there, and I just feel so honored to share the stage with 3 very beloved friends and colleagues.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay. You all have done amazing, amazing work. The 3 of you have really been in this from the beginning in a way that some of the folks on stage today have, but there's a different quality to it with the 3 of you. And the first question I want to ask you is kind of centered around the reality that I know each one of you have gone through your periods of struggle in the last couple years.
Nope.
Working on all of this. No, you've been happy the whole time.
No, never struggled.
Never.
No.
Not a single time.
Not currently struggling.
No. Your partner was fine giving birth and you were chill the whole time? Yeah. Mhm. And you've all kept going. You're all here today on stage. You're still doing the work in your own ways. Tell us about how you've gotten through, what has gotten you out of bed in the morning on the days when things were really hard.
My inflatable hot tub. It sounds like a joke, it's not. No, I mean, Heidi talked about this a little bit, and I think it's worth coming back to, which is the ability to see a challenge as an opportunity. I think that in the space that we're in right now, especially when it comes to affordability, right? Like there's no question. Like, turn to the person next to you, ask them what like the biggest challenge is right now at the Oregon Measure 109 program. 99% of us are going to say affordability. And the question is, can we see that challenge as an opportunity, yes or no? And if it's yes, the question then becomes, okay, what are we going to go do about it? Right? And I think that there is a growing number of people who are not only willing to ask the first question and say yes, but are willing to ask the second question and move forward, not necessarily knowing what the answer is, or that there is one answer. There might be multiple answers. And that's what it's going to take for us to actually develop multiple solutions. There is not one answer, at least in the short term, and probably not in the long term, to solve for affordability. There's going to be collections of answers. And once we can break out of what is a very depressing and traumatic space of this is the problem and it forever will be a problem, which is easier said than done to break out of that space. But when we can, and when we do, to find the momentum collectively to start talking about what's possible beyond where we are today, that's what paves the path to the future, to an affordable, accessible, equitable future. And I think we've got a lot of tools to work with, and it's really a mentality at the end of the day, and that's easier said than done. And I think it does take community and individual intention, and getting back on the horse again at the end of the day.
And having a hot tub.
Inflatable hot tub's pretty great. Gonna throw out an endorsement for those. Yeah.
Not the cold plunge, that doesn't get you up?
Well, we're not talking about my whole morning routine,
Okay.
but like, you know.
I was thinking we could commit the rest of this panel to Sam's. Yeah. Let's do the ventriloquist act, where I'll just say what I think you're going to say.
That would be fun, maybe for like the after parties.
Okay.
I think, I was going to say, yeah, my son and my cats are what get me out of bed, having morning people in the house. But in a deeper level, the sense of belonging and being accountable to the people around me. And the sense of belonging that means that what I am doing matters and how I am doing matters, and that I can lean on those around me and ask for the support I need in order to carry on. I've had many breakdowns. I have cried in front of all three of the people here and probably at least 24 people in this room over the last few years, and there will be more. And I think, not so different from what you shared, Sam, having cultivated with the medicines and through other ways, a deep, bone-deep sense of possibility. That is a discipline. People ask often, how do you do what you do? I don't know how you do it all. I also say, I don't know. We'll see if this is sustainable. But I also feel generally like under the pressures we've been under, I'll speak for myself, to be coping rather well. And I think it's that sense of possibility and the sense that just like the mushrooms have done their mycelial weaving, just like the water moves, that there is a way, and to have a wayfinding mentality. It has opened doors that I did not believe were possible. I think there were times that I was like weeks away from us not being able to make payroll, and people on the stage helped me find the funders to get the grant to keep going. We didn't think we were going to be able to have a psilocybin experiential element for our students. And in the 11th hour, Intertrek opened their service center, and we're so collaborative, and we were able to provide our students with a psilocybin experience as they're learning to be psilocybin facilitators, which I cannot overstate the importance of. And so it's not just mentality, it's really having the communal support that is not just in word, but in action, that has that sense of interdependence, has, I use this expression in my book, which will come out next month, but the communal sense of stoking the collective fire of hope, and that we have to take turns And sometimes you got to blow on it because it's just embers, and sometimes it's a bonfire. We can all just vibe and celebrate. But making sure that at any given time, someone is holding the voice of possibility and hope for the collective.
I like the casual mention that you wrote a book and it's coming out shortly. Wow. Sam's hot tub gets me out of bed in the morning. No, it hasn't yet, but I'd like it to. It's almost like we rehearsed this because it's a similar thread. When things feel impossible or I feel paralyzed by anxiety, which is usually related to responsibility I've opted into and not wanting to let people down. I mean, similarly, when we're building Intertrek in our training program, we had rock star students, graduates who are out in the audience right now, and we were days away trying to open up our school, still working with the Department of Education and the Department of Justice to help them understand why we're ready to be licensed, how to pronounce the word psilocybin, whatever it is. And so there's real struggle, but the well of hope that I find myself dipping into, especially when things are challenging or I feel exhausted, and that well seems to be always there for me, is a longer perspective. I often think about things beyond my lifetime, which will be a brief blip. I've been dead almost, forever, and life is going to go by really quickly, and I firmly believe humans will be here for hundreds of more millennia. And so during this brief blip, I have watched so many things happen in my own life, and I feel like looking out, that didn't feel possible and markedly improved the lives of individuals or whole categories of people. And maybe that is a confirmation bias, and I'm fostering something that isn't real, but I just believe it in my bones that we are getting better, that there is regression, but I believe that we are getting kinder. I believe that we are getting better at understanding nebulous problems that have disastrous circumstances, like climate crisis. I believe we are, it just feels like the march, it doesn't naturally bend this arc towards justice, but I just think that there's so many good people, and I see them every day, working on so many problems, new problems I didn't even know about. Every now and then there's like a whole new problem and a whole new incredible cadre of people working towards it. So it feels to me like we are going to get back to where we once were in terms of not having the war on drugs. I think that hopefully will be a blip in human history. I think the madness of the carceral state, pent up by drug convictions and an extremely racist system of profiling and policing, will eventually be a blip. I think we will get there. And it is hard to even say that right now because it can feel dismissive of the people actively suffering and actively sitting behind bars for doing what we're doing in Oregon. But it's where I have to go to feel some hope and some optimism, and I do think we're going to get there. So a longer perspective, which psychedelics seem to have, seem to help you manifest a little bit more because it helps you die as well and then come back. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's interesting.
That's a good word for it. Thank you all. I want us to look forward now and do some dreaming. I know all three of you are fantastic dreamers and visioners, and you have to be in the roles that you're in. And I kind of heard little bits of that in each of what you said, of that dream and that vision keeps you going, gets you out of bed every day. When you imagine a society where psychedelics are responsibly integrated, what does that look like? Give us some details. How might that feel to live in a society like that?
As I was thinking about this question, I was envisioning at first all the things I don't want to see and thought about, okay, then what actually is it? And the image that came to me was, I guess, a comparison of other disciplines that are so widely available to the public, that the best practices, the ethics, The safety considerations are part of being in a society and in a community. One discipline I thought of that actually brings me so much pleasure is gardening. And instead of thinking about a future where there are many, many psychedelic businesses, envisioning a future where there are, for lack of a better term, many psychedelic gardens in all the neighborhoods, in all the places, and where truly it is at that individual and communal family system, social circle level, people able to have choices about how to provide for themselves. Just like with gardening, there's a lot involved with growing your own vegetables, and you may want to get some from the farmer's market. You may want to get some at the grocery store. You may want to get some at a restaurant. But having all these choices without value judgments and moral judgments about what choice you select, that feels parallel to what I would like to see in a just psychedelic future, which is regardless of what route people choose, they know how to navigate that safely and smartly, and they also do not run the risk of being criminalized for those choices.
You want me to go?
Samwise?
You know, as for better or for worse, a political creature, it's so incredible to see the trajectory in which psychedelics is transcending partisan politics in an environment which few, if any, other issues are. That gives me hope, not just for the future of psychedelics, but frankly for the future of society, if we're thinking big here. And I'm going to channel Bob Jesse right now. If you don't know who Bob Jesse is, go Google him. But Bob always has these incredible analogies of thinking about a society, a future society, hopefully one that is not too far off, that can view psychedelics in the same way that they view rock climbing. There's an inherent danger into all kinds of things that we do on a day-to-day basis that society, in a rock climbing example, accepts all of them. There's many different types of rock climbing. Some people wear shoes, some don't. Some people have a rope and someone with them, some don't, right? And we have a full understanding, that's cool and that's okay, and we want you to be safe and informed and really understand the full breadth of both the risks and benefits. That's what I want for psychedelics. That's what I think we want as a society for psychedelics. And we have a lot of work to do to get there, but I am hopeful that as we continue to hold both the opportunity and the responsibility that we have in the state-regulated access model, continuing to open up access, continuing to acknowledge where the gaps are, and having humility about those gaps and leveraging that humility to start to fill those gaps, will create a better world. And ask anyone who knows me, I don't normally talk like that in a bigger, better world. I am a pragmatist to a fault in a lot of degrees, and I'm constantly in my day-to-day thinking about we can talk about the world all day long, but what are we doing today? Which is also an important question. But frankly, psychedelics have helped me become more flexible in my belief for society and the world. I'm incredibly grateful for that, because that has allowed me to extend the ability to think about what I want for myself and I want for all of us in the future. And that's what helps me get up in the morning.
Mm-hmm. I've observed these changes. Sam, could I go rock climbing on psychedelics?
I would not advise it.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know if it's in the next 5 years or decade, almost certainly in my lifetime. I believe the state-regulated access, where you have the government helping with informed by experts, helping people develop an intentional relationship with psychedelics. I believe, especially now that we replicated this in Colorado, and that there's a measure moving forward in Massachusetts, which many of us are working on, and that Governor Newsom, because maybe of presidential aspirations, vetoed the bill in California, but said maybe regulated access, and then all of a sudden you have one of the biggest population centers in the world coming online. I don't see this not coming to fruition with a federal policy covered by Medicare or Medicaid or the Oregon Health Plan. It feels like I can't imagine a reality where that doesn't happen. And I don't say that because it's going to be automatic, but because I watch and I'm seeing all these people working full time to make it happen. And really they're just wanting to be intentional and not create a cultural backlash or a political backlash. I see us bringing on additional medicines. I think if there was more research into acid and that pulled the best, we would have legalized acid. But we had psilocybin. I think that we'll add ayahuasca into this model. I think that we'll add mescaline, not derived from peyote, per the request of the Native American Church, to this model. I think there'll be the FDA pathway, and I think we're going to continue to pass decriminalization policies, and we're working on a local ballot measure to provide additional local protections in Portland where people can have community gardens, where people can grow what they want in their backyard, where people can have local farmers.
Make sure you're registered to vote if you live in Portland or Oregon, please.
I think that it's going to happen much, much faster than we think. I read an article from my friend Liz Yacker in the Oregonian a couple of days ago from 2017, and the beginning was like, this therapist couple and a bunch of people working on this, pretty cool, has no chance. And every expert in the article was like, cool idea, cool story, bro, like no chance. And here we are in like a few years. So this is both what I think is the most likely scenario, and I think this will also pull at the threads of the carceral state and so many other just massive injustices that are propped up by the war on people and the war on drugs. It feels like the most likely scenario, and we have to keep pushing for it. If anybody has a complaint, which I love complaints, like have them, because that's the best opportunity to be like, all right, so what are you gonna do about it? And so I like to send people the link to contact the legislators, contact your senator and rep, ask this to be covered by the Oregon Health Plan. You wanna bring a different medicine, do that. And if you wanna help us out at the Plant Medicine Healing Alliance with our forthcoming ballot measure, go to plantmedicinehealing.org and send an email, and I'll find its way to my inbox when I'm off paternal leave through January. So I'm feeling pretty juiced. There's a lot of hardship, but like this is going to happen. We are going to get there, but it's not going to be automatic.
Thank you all for painting that beautiful picture. Sounds like a world I want to live in. So I want to ask you in a few words, so like very distilled each, what advice would you give to people who want to get into this field?
It's a passion. Hopefully it's something that gets you out of bed in the morning. It is not immediately your day job. Don't quit your day job, I guess is my thought. Above ground, underground, etc. Financial pressures lead to an abandonment of values very quickly. So if you can find yourself not in that situation, you're just going to be a more joyful person and not accidentally harm people when they're in altered states of consciousness.
Get out of your house, do your research, ask people questions. Can't tell you how many times a day I get emails. Our entire staff get emails. There are answers to, and often that there are not answers to. But at the end of the day, being able and willing to put yourself, we have this term like, are you willing to jump in the deep end with a blindfold? If so, this is a space for you, because it's a pretty deep space. And you generally figure out how to swim if you're willing to believe in yourself at the end of the day. So believe in yourself is the other aspect, I'd say.
And get an inflatable hot tub.
Coleman, where's my sponsorship?
I would say find mentorship, no matter your age. Doesn't have to automatically be an elder, but value the elders among us. Learn how to be in community, learn how to disagree and work across difference. The last thing we want to see, and we've seen it time and again in this field and others, is coalitions self-destructing, beautiful projects self-destructing because we didn't have the skills, resources, capacity to work through conflict. I think that there's so much opportunity there for us. It is the work. We talk about this all the time. It's the work. I think there's so much humility required to be in that work. So become great friends with humility and surround yourself with people who will help you be humble if you forget yourself. Yeah, and I would just say, take your time and move relationally, come back again and again to relationship.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you've done, and I know you'll continue to do.
Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome.